Trish and Rob MacGregor welcome you to a place where all kinds of phenomena flourish. Here we meet authors, researchers, and investigators of the mysterious, the strange, and of the inexplicable anomalies that surround us. Step out of the everyday world and take a journey into the mystical underground.
And if you guys are ready, we'll start in 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to the Mystical Underground. Thank you for joining us. This is Rob MacGregor
and Trish MacGregor.
And our producer and tech magician, Jon Posey. You can go to themysticalunderground.com where we make regular blog posts and where you can find out about books. Among them are The 7 Secrets of Synchronicity, Sensing the Future, The Secrets of Spirit Communication, and Aliens in the Backyard. Our latest book is called Mind-Blowing Synchronicities, the latest science, stories, and research. Trish's latest novel, Silent Thunder, and Rob's most recent novel is called Tulpas, a story of mysterious beings created through a deep meditation. If you are watching us on the YouTube, we would appreciate it if you would take a second to click the like, subscribe, and notification buttons so you never miss an episode. If you prefer to listen to the show, it is available wherever you listen to podcasts. Please subscribe there.
Our guest today is Adam, I hope I pronounced your last name correctly, Rizvi.
Rizvi.
Is that right? Okay.
That's right.
A critical care physician and neurologist who has spent over a decade applying spiritual principles in intensive care settings. He's based in California and continues to practice medicine while teaching and co-hosting the spirituality podcast called Letters to the Sky. He's here at the Mystical Underground to talk about his book, Love Does Not Know Death. Okay.
Welcome.
It's great to have you, Adam.
It's kind of hard to be here. Oh, it's good to be here, Trish, Rob. Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Okay, as a critical care physician, you must encounter death or the potential of it on a regular basis, if not daily. What inspired you to write Love Does Not Know Death?
Interesting question. Maybe two things did. It started off as a vague intention to publish a journal that I have. I have something called my death journal. It started in fellowship, critical care fellowship. Every patient that died that I was physically present for, meaning in their room, holding their hand or by their bedside, and I watched them go and make their transition. I wanted to, where it came from was so many of these patients died without families. No one was there. No one was there to witness. Yeah, it's so sad. There was no one there. And oftentimes it was just me and a nurse. Patients that sometimes were trauma patients and we didn't even know their name. They came in as a John Doe or a trauma name that was assigned to them. And I just thought, I don't want them to be alone. I want to be, even if it's a stranger that cares for them and loves for them, let me be there. And then I wanted to honor them. So I would start jotting down my experiences, what led to them coming into the hospital, what we did, and then how they died, and then my experience of their death and the things that happened. I have over 500 entries now in that death journal. Yeah, a lot of experiences of death. And as I was accumulating all these stories, it was my way of sort of processing the heaviness of it all and my way of honoring them, loving them, praying for them. Mm-hmm. But in the process of doing that, I ended up gathering very interesting stories and very synchronistic experiences of death and that surrounded death. But the real catalyst was when my father died. The day after he died, it was in Istanbul in Turkey, and I was still processing the fact that I would never see him again. And I was in a huge mall in Istanbul. They have this gigantic mall that's like just one big circle with layers and layers on top of it. And the circle looks down on this central area where people can walk around. And I remember walking on one of those balconies, looking down and seeing a mom with her kid, an elderly couple holding hands, a couple of lovers walking by. And it was like I was seeing the whole gambit of humanity. And then it struck me, every single one of those people will have lost a parent, a child, a spouse, either in the now or in the soon future. And then it kind of hit me like a ton of bricks. If what I'm feeling, the immensity of the grief of my dad's death, is also happening for at least once for every human being I'm seeing, it like suddenly dawned on me that the suffering of humanity is so immense. And in that moment, I felt this like huge compassion to just dedicate my life to alleviate even a tiny bit of that. And I thought, okay, let me start with publishing this death journal. Let me talk about some of the stories of death to allay the fears of death and to give some hope. And then that turned into the book. So that's the genesis of it.
That's
Did your
heavy.
father? Yeah. Did your father die suddenly, or was he sick for a while? Did you know what was coming?
He had heart disease, and he ended up dying of a heart attack. But he had the heart attack on a flight coming back to the United States, but the plane had to get diverted to Istanbul because of him having a heart attack. And he lasted for about 3 to 4 days after the heart attack before he finally passed away. It gave us enough time to fly from Washington, D.C. to Istanbul and say our goodbyes. But it was quite sudden.
Yeah. So were you there at the time of his death?
No, Istanbul, they have a lovely culture, but they have very strict rules. They only allow family to visit twice a day for 5 minutes at a time.
Wow.
Very
Why?
strict. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. So we didn't get a chance. We saw him briefly twice a day, and then when he passed away, it was in the middle of the night, and I got a call in the middle of the night about his passing. Yeah.
How did he face death? Was he frightened of it, or did he accept it? Or...
You know what's funny? Speaking of synchronicities, my dad did not like talking about death at all. Whenever I was already in practice, so I told him, Dad, you got to get your advance directives in. You have to tell us what you want, if you end up in the ICU. Do you want to be resuscitated, intubated, these sort of things? And he always pushed it off, said, no, I don't want to talk about that. And then he went on this pilgrimage to the Middle East, and a day or two before he left, out of the blue, he said, okay, I want to fill out my advance directives. Here it is. If something should happen to me, I want you to be the executor of my will. And then he signed the paperwork and he emailed it to me.
Jeez.
The day before he left. And I think he knew on an unconscious level he might not be coming back, because he never made it back. He ended up dying on the way back in Istanbul. So he knew. He knew.
Yeah. You have a very excuse me, Trish, I just want to get this one question. You have a very interesting upbringing with from your as both Catholic and a Muslim influences, and can you talk about how that affected your life?
Yeah, that was very interesting. My mother was raised Catholic. She was born in northwestern France, and so Roman Catholic. And then my father was born in Karachi, Pakistan. So he was born Muslim. They met and fell in love. They were both pretty open-minded people. And so I was raised in a pretty open-minded household where both cultures and religions were shared and taught. But it was funny, every time I went to my grandparents on either side, I got the hardcore version of each of those traditions. I would say my dad, although he was a practicing Muslim, and mom a practicing Christian or Catholic, they never forced anything on me. But then going to my respective families in Pakistan, and I really got a deep sense of Catholicism and Islam from those two families.
And since you've been with so many people who have died, have you seen the soul leave the body at any point?
There's a lot in that question.
I know. Sorry, I'm just curious because I don't think I've ever met a critical care physician before, but I've met people, who've been at the bedside and have seen.
Yeah. Well, the question presupposes that a soul is something that can be seen, and that it's something distinct from us. I think we could probably do a deep dive into what exactly soul means. But I will tell you, I have seen very interesting phenomena. I'll preface this by saying I am not a psychic. I'm not a medium. I have no training in any of that. My training's in Western medicine. But I'll share examples of the things that I've seen. One patient who passed away, moments after his heart line flattened, both me and the nurse that were in the room at the time distinctly remarked that the lights got very dim. It's like the feeling of what you have a sunny day and then a really dark cloud just blots out the sun, and all of a sudden everything gets like dimmer.
Right.
That happened, and then moments later, when I was doing sort of an internal prayer, and the nurse actually asked to offer a prayer out loud, and she did. Which was beautiful, beautiful prayer, which, by the way, doesn't happen a lot in the hospital. But this nurse, kudos to her, she really felt compelled to do it. She did that. And then moments after we were sitting in silence and she had offered the prayer, the opposite happened. The room felt like someone turned on this light switch, and it got brighter and brighter. So that was fascinating. And then one other experience I recall, where a patient passed away, and it was an odd thing. I saw a swirling, like a whirlpool of light above him and to the right. And it sort of looked like it was overlying the television that was above him. And I thought for a second maybe the TV was on and that something was on the screen. But I kind of did this and tilted my head a little bit, and just to see if it was on the TV or what was that I was seeing. But it was something that was actually in the space between him and the television. And it had this motion to it that was swirling. And then moments later, I saw something move from him and go towards that whirlpool. Wow. It was sort of like a wisp of something. I don't know if that answers your question, but those are some of the things that I've seen.
Yeah, the wisp does.
Yeah. So, a somewhat related question: have any patients ever come back and said to you that they had near-death experiences and talked about what happened?
Yeah, I've had several share that with me, and I had one gentleman in particular who had a heart surgery. He came out of it after his heart had stopped, and said that he had experienced seeing the surgeon working with him while he was in the operating table, which I know is a very common report. And he also said he met friends and family who had already passed on. He didn't say that he was given the choice to stay and, sort of the typical thing. He just said he saw them briefly, and then sort of like in a dream, and woke up. And he felt like he legitimately had a near-death experience. And the interesting thing is, after that experience, he was absolutely convinced, which I've heard from other reports, that when he dies, he will live on, and he will see the people who he was seeing in that moment. And I think I've noticed that in a lot of people, in a lot of near-death experiences, there's like this deep knowing that death isn't the end. Like it's not even like an intellectual exercise anymore. Right. They know it with absolute conviction, and that's kind of infectious. It makes you feel that as well. At least for me, it does.
Yeah.
Why did you go into critical care? Of all the different things you could do as a doctor, what?
I thought it was exciting.
Okay.
I was young when I made the decision. I liked the excitement of it. But the interesting thing about critical care is when the when the thing hits the fan, and everything falls apart. It's not just one organ that falls apart. Oftentimes, it's all of them. The kidneys go, the liver goes, the heart goes, the lung goes, and they all interact with each other in very interesting ways, and it makes for a very complex puzzle. And I think I was very curious about that and excited to help and use my knowledge in that way. But I'll tell you, between you and me and all the listeners, that got really old real quick. I'm not interested in the emergency. I'm not interested in the chaos and the excitement of it. I'd rather have a boring day and have everyone survive than not. But where the joy I get nowadays is in sitting with a family, helping them process grief and shock and anger and sorrow, and sitting with them and healing with them. Those moments are infinitely more gratifying than the intellectual and excitement side of it.
Huh.
So do you see people, relatives especially, just saying, no, this can't be, that he cannot die, this is, or she cannot die, this is not possible? Just kind of the rejection of what's happening. Is that common to...
way more common than you would think. I know Elizabeth Kubler-Ross talks about the 5 stages of grief, and I think there's so much more to than just 5 stages, and it's not linear. But I'm surprised at how often denial is the first go-to in terms of defense mechanisms. It is the most primitive, but it's also surprisingly the one that people seem to go to the most. I remember this one woman when I was early in my clinical career. Her husband had end-stage prostate cancer, stage 4, widely metastatic. It was in his liver, in his bones, and everywhere. And he was actively dying. I could see it. His heart rate was slow. His liver function and kidney function was shot. It was a matter of hours, and the wife wanted to speak to the ICU doctor to give her an update. And so I came over. I wanted to update her. I was just starting that shift, so this was the first time that I was connecting with her. And so she said, "Well, tell me, how's he doing, Doc?" And I said, "Well, tell me your understanding first, because I like to see where they're at, and it helps me tailor what I say." And so she said, "Okay, well, I know he has prostate cancer and it's metastasized, but he's going to make it through this, Doc. He's going to make it through this." And then I said, "Okay, I hear you. Let me just share with you what I see." And I told her, I don't want to take away hope. That's not my job, but my job is to share with you and to be honest with you about what I'm seeing, and with all the labs and all the vitals, so that you can prepare yourself. And I told her he has multi-organ failure. All of his the majority of his organs are failing. And from the lab work, it looks like he may not have much longer here with us. And I want you to prepare yourself. And I just saw this look of rage come over her face. And then she pointed her finger at me right in my face, and she said, "He's going to make it out of this hospital. He's going to walk out. And if he doesn't, I know it's your fault."
Oh, wow.
And then she storms away. And I don't know if you've ever felt the brunt of pure rage, but it doesn't feel good at all. And I felt like, oh gosh, I know he's going to die because the lab work indicates it. But now I know she's going to sue me. She's going to take me to court. And I was just, as a young physician, I was like, what am I going to do? And then sure enough, that very night, he passed away. And I prayed for him. He was one of the entries in my journal. I never heard from her, and she never sued us, so that's good. But that was pure denial. But I do think she knew on some level that he wasn't going to make it, but couldn't bear to bring that to conscious awareness. Yeah.
But do you find that some people know they're going to die? Some patients, are they acutely aware of it?
Yeah. Yes. There's a spectrum. I've only had one patient tell me, when I was in Tucson, one patient tell me that they were going to die in this hospital visit, and they looked good, but they had this look on their face. They're like, I know I'm going to die, doc. I know I'm going to die, and I'm scared. Like, they were scared, but they knew, and they did die. They died a few days later. What was
their problem? What?
They had a lung disease. They had an interstitial lung disease. It was fairly end stage, but the way they were breathing, they must have known intuitively. And then I've had other patients that have said something that was a little bit more wrapped in symbolism. Like, I had one patient who was in the ICU, very confused, also with multi-organ involvement. And in the midst of her confusion, she said, the train is coming. I got to get on the train.
Jeez.
I got to hop on the train. I'm going to miss the train. And she kept saying it over and over again. And I remember the nurses saying, oh, she's delirious. She's confused. Huh. And I thought, yeah, she might be delirious, but there's something interesting about the use of the symbolism of hopping the train, getting on the train,
Huh.
So, and she ended up passing away a few days later.
I just heard a nurse who works around people in a near-death situation or that are in their last days, and she said she's surprised by it was something I saw on the internet. Hey, yeah, she said that she's very surprised that patients, so many of them tell her that they're going to die now, and she said none of their vitals have changed, just like it was hours ago or days ago. But then within minutes, they were right. They pass minutes or an hour, they're gone, and they somehow are able to tell that's their time is up.
I do think we know, similar to my dad, he had an intuition that maybe he wouldn't be able to come back home, and so he signed all the paperwork. I've heard stories of, master meditators, Buddhist monks and whatnot in the mountains. They tell their team or their students, like, okay, I'm going to die in 7 days. Prepare the funeral and whatnot. And they go off into a cabin or whatever, and sure enough, they're dead in 7 days. I feel like the more evolved, and this might be a stretch, but the more spiritually aware, I shouldn't say evolved, the more spiritually aware we are, the more we start to get an intuitive sense about these things. That's my impression.
My sister died suddenly 2 years ago, and at the beginning of that year, she said, Trish, can you look at, I'm an astrologer, and she said, can you look at my birth chart and tell me what to expect this year? So I did, and said, a lot of foreign travel and all this stuff came true. But the one thing I missed was that Jupiter was in her sun sign, and quite often when that happens, it's an easier death. And she was such a healthy person, I never thought, yeah, you're going to go, Mary. It just never occurred to me. But that has happened to other people, like Whitley's wife. And it's a shock.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
Of course, I don't know, even if I'd seen it, what I would have said to her. Yeah, you're going to die this year.
Yeah, she was just perfectly healthy, and she had just taken a long 15-mile bike ride and exercise, and seemed like a very, healthy person, but then got this virus and sepsis and just suddenly died like in 2 days in the hospital. I mean, her children were very upset. because it just seemed like, what happened? How could they have let her die?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. That's another thing. I'm glad you mentioned that, Rob. I can't speak on behalf of all doctors, obviously, or all nurses, but I will tell you the vast, vast majority of doctors and nurses genuinely are trying to do their best with what they know. And we don't know a lot. We really are still quite limited in how the body works and how the mind works. But we do our best. We try to use the medication. So when someone dies, it's not... Now, this is not always the case, but I will say more often than not, it's not because the doctors and nurses didn't try. It's because it's someone's time.
Yeah, I think you're right. So you write that the opposite of love is not hate, it's fear. Can you talk about that? That's interesting. Looking at it.
Yeah, it's. Granted, it's just a perspective that I offer. Not. I'm not saying this to be a dogmatic or anything, but it's just an interesting way of looking at things. When I look at life, I feel like there's two general stances I can take in any given moment. I can look at what is in this moment, who I am, how the world appears to me, my relationships, and I can be in a place of total allowing, with no resistance to what is, just a genuine peace. And I would say that that's a loving state. It's because there's no violence, there's no fighting. You're not telling the world you got to be something different. I feel like a lot of suffering, and this is the fear that comes up. Fear for me is any form of resistance to the present moment. You're basically saying this, what is right now is not okay. It needs to change. I need to fix it. I need to change it. Either you're seeking to change someone else because you think that they shouldn't be the way they are. They shouldn't say what they're saying. They shouldn't do what they're doing. Or you feel like you should change. I shouldn't have done this. I shouldn't say this. We beat ourselves up. But the fundamental attitude behind both of those is a not being okay with what is. It's like a fight. It's a fight against the present moment. And that kind of resistance is fear-based, and it pushes against or it pulls against. And there's so much suffering in that. And there's so much suffering. Now, I want to say, when I say going to a place of love and accepting what is, it does not mean you're condoning the actions of people around you. It does not mean that you're saying the things that are happening around you, if they're wrong, are okay. It just means internally there's no more suffering and fighting. You've accepted the way the world is showing up. There's a allowing for this moment to be what it is. And more importantly, the real switch from fear to love is, instead of using what is, let's say someone said something bad to you, okay? And they're blaming you and they're judging you, and you feel attacked. Fear would say, I can't stand for this. They need to be punished. The world needs to see that they're being a terrible person. I need to let them know and seek justice. And then you fight for yourself and for others. That's this, Now, it's possible for you to internally say, you know what? I'm going to completely allow what's happening, and I'm going to shift my perspective to a loving perspective. And a loving perspective would say, okay, there's a possibility for me to forgive this person, forgive myself, embrace this moment as an opportunity for self-growth. And then as soon as I do that, then you can take action in the way that you feel guided to. And it may be that you call this person out, that you tell them that they're being unloving, that they need to be reported to the authorities if they're doing something wrong. You still take action, but the question is the action coming from fear, or is it coming from love?
Well, I wonder if
I'm sorry, Trish, real quick, because I have to get one pop culture reference into the podcast, and I think Yoda said it best. Fear is the path to the dark side. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering. And so just
Yoda knew what he was talking about.
yeah. Sorry, just wanted to get that in there.
It's a good point, though. Yoda was wise.
Yeah.
Well, do you think that kind of struggle that people have shortens their lives?
Stress does, certainly.
Stress does.
Yeah, stress absolutely does. We know that cortisol levels and stress, worry will shorten people's lives. We're in a society that I think is maybe a little bit too focused on longevity and trying to live as long as possible. I think it's possible to have short lives, but deeply impactful, meaningful, high-quality lives. And the truth is, we don't know when we're going to die. For all we know, one of us might die tomorrow.
Yeah.
And so the real invitation, I think, is, can we use this moment right now to come to a place of total allowing and peace and love, really? Love not in the sort of saccharine, superficial sense, but a genuine, like, authenticity with each other. I'll tell you, Trish, Rob, John, the reason why I'm talking about this is because when I'm at the bedside and families are dealing with their loved ones that are about to die, their dad, their mom, their spouse that's about to die, they are being handed an opportunity. Either they can fight against what's happening, fight against the inevitable, and suffer in a painful way. And I've seen that happen. I've seen the suffering of denial and the suffering of blame. Instead of accepting that their loved one's about to die, the person goes on a rant about who's to blame. Instead, they can embrace this opportunity and say, let's use these last moments together for healing. If there's anything that has been unsaid, say it. If there's any grievance that needs to be forgiven, forgive it for yourself and for other. There's so much opportunity for healing at the moments leading up to death that I felt like I needed to talk about it. I needed people to know you don't have to wait till someone's about to die to love each other and to forgive each other. You can do it now, and life changes dramatically. I've seen families do that, and I tell you, it is a miracle to see when families who have been estranged and angry at each other finally use the death of a loved one to come together and love and forgive. It's such a thing to see.
Yeah, but have you seen the opposite, where they're at each other's throats too?
Far more often.
Yeah,
unfortunately.
Yeah, I've seen that too, and being in a hospital where they're, people obviously they're related and they haven't had a good relationship, and suddenly they're, because of the loved one is going, they're right there, and everything comes out, and they're at each other's throat. Yeah, that's right. It's kind of sad. How did you come up?
I know this. If I ever get really sick, I'm coming to where you are. Be a death.
Yeah.
That's pretty interesting.
Yeah. How did you come up with your title? Did it just come to you, or did it take a while to come up with? Love Does Not Know Death. That's a good title.
Thanks. Yeah, I think I was just walking outside one day. I knew. I think the tentative. I have all these Google documents where I was trying to write the chapters, and the placeholder was my death journal, because it sort of came from my death journal. But I knew that wasn't going to be the final title. And then I thought about one of the main messages is that who we are lives on beyond death. Who we are is eternal and immortal. And I thought, okay, well, who we really are is love. We that's the core of our being. And if that is who we are, then it doesn't even know death. And that's when the idea of love does not know death. It always title. Is.
Huh. You working on another book?
Yeah, this is going to be a companion book. I kind of hinted at this in chapters 9 and 10 of the book, but my second book is going to be about disease. And I've noticed, I've seen a lot of patients the way that their disease shows up is highly symbolic. The fact that people will have their lungs fail or their hearts fail or their pancreas fail, or there's so much symbolism in that it's often a clue as to what they need to work on and what the invitation is that needs to be healed on a deeper level. And I don't think enough people are aware of that. They think that when they get sick, it's just sort of a random thing, like, oh well, I got sick and let me take the pill and get better. But it really, what it is, I think we've lost the spiritual domain of healing and healthcare. Thousands of years ago, our ancient ancestors knew that when you got sick, there was a spiritual reason, there was a spiritual domain to it, and that not only did you need to address the body, but you needed to address the emotions and the mind and the spirit. And there was a holistic approach to dealing with someone who was ill. We've sort of divorced most of the important aspects from the body, and we just focus on treating the body. And I kind of want to bring the rest back so people understand, when you get ill, when you get sick, it is a call to healing. It's an invitation for transformation, but people need to see it as such first.
You know, that you're talking like Louise. Are you familiar with Louise Hayes?
Very familiar with her. Yeah, she pioneered this.
And she didn't have a medical background. I mean, her whole thing came from her cancer diagnosis.
Yeah. See, people who have disease and they note the interesting synchronicities with what's happening in their life and their disease, they get a sense of it. But I think we need to bring structure to it.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, I mean, she knew she had been raped early on in her life, and that's why she developed the cancer. And she started her program of forgiveness, which I thought was brilliant.
It is brilliant. She paved the way, and I'm hoping to follow in her footsteps. And I've seen so many interesting things in the hospital with the way that people get sick. And I think people take Louise Hay unfortunately on a superficial level, and they think that you just need to say the positive affirmation and everything is going to get better. But that's just slapping a Band-Aid on top of something deep that needs to be looked at. And I want to dive deep into that with my second book.
Oh, I can't wait. What's this one going to be called?
Well, I don't know yet. I'm thinking to keep along the theme and maybe call it Love Does Not Know Disease. But I also have 2 or 3 alternate titles as well. So who knows?
I can't wait to read that one. Yeah. Oh, you got to come back on the podcast when that comes out too. Because I don't think any doctors have really followed up on Louise Hay's initial book,
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. I want to go back and to your childhood again, because there is something that you wrote about that I found kind of hilarious and very interesting and unusual. For an 8-year-old kid, you decided you knew what you wanted to be when you grew up, and wow, you wanted to be a saint. I mean, wow. and you went to a library and asked a librarian, what's the track? What do I need to do?
Yeah. Wow. That's funny. Well, you know what? I think if I look back on it right now, you ask kids what they want to be, and they'll say they want to be Superman, or they want to be a superhero, right? Like Spider-Man or Batman or something. When I was young, my mom gave me little booklets that had the different lives of various saints. She just thought that was, Catholic saints, but then she really expanded it to saints from other religions and traditions. And I remember I read a story of Saint Teresa of Avila. She's a Catholic saint from Spain. And there's this really, now I'm not saying any of these things are true, but this is the story. The story is that she was in a pew. She was in a church chapel, and the sermon was going on, and she started to have this like ecstatic vision of the Christ, and she was closing her eyes, and both of her fellow nuns were next to her, and as she was having this vision, her body started to levitate. And her nuns knew that whenever she had these visions, she would levitate. And so they actually grabbed her arms and held her down and pinned her down so that she wouldn't disrupt the service. And I thought that was hilarious. And there's been other stories too, like there's a very famous saint who in the Buddhist tradition, his name is Milarepa. For Buddhists, he's super famous, but for Westerners, we've never heard the term or the name. But Milarepa was known to not only levitate, but he would fly from mountaintop to mountaintop. Huh. And I thought, I want to fly. That'd be super cool. And essentially I said I wanted to be like Superman, but I didn't really have the reference, but I did have the reference of these saints. So I thought, okay, right. Superpowers, ability to fly. Okay, clearly I have to be a saint. That's the next step.
Right. But when you look into their lives, a lot of them had pretty rough times, being tortured, burned to death, and did not have the. I mean, they did things that allowed them, to reach sainthood, but their ending was oftentimes.
Yeah. Well, you said so. You became a saint in terms of the work you do.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting that you say that. I realize now the thing that maybe interested me in saints at the beginning was not what interests me now, but it's actually what the saints really cared about. It wasn't the powers, it was the love for humanity. Mm-hmm. It was the desire to be of service and to bring people closer to God or to the divine or source, whatever term you want to use. And then I realized that's what I care about. That's the only thing I care about. I care about service, and I care about spirit, and I care about bringing people to the place of healing and peace. So in a sense, I'm still being inspired by the saints, but for different reasons.
Yeah. So you did have insight to your future. That's interesting. Yeah. So what about what happened during COVID? Did you work with COVID patients?
I did a lot. Yes, that was rough. The ICUs were overflowing. I mean, I don't need to belabor the point, but we all had a really hard time as providers during that.
Were you in California?
I was in Arizona at the time.
Arizona.
And you had to really mask yourself and your bodies, right? I mean, cover up.
Yeah, we had these PAPR suits, they called them, positive pressure suits, sort of like hazmat suits with motors on the side that would pump air on the inside so that the sort of infected air from the outside didn't get inside your suit. Huh. It was, I think the roughest part about COVID, which many who were in the ICU know, that we would have to close the doors to the room in the ICU. And so family members weren't allowed in to hold their loved one's hands. And oftentimes their loved one would die alone in a vacuum sealed room while their family was on the outside looking in. That was painful to watch. Yeah. That was rough.
That must have been.
So you wouldn't have been able to be with them.
No, although when I had the suit on, I would go into the room and care for them. So yes, I was able sometimes to be with them at the moment of their passing, but there was a moment in the peak of the pandemic where we actually ran out of equipment, and the companies that were making this equipment had to produce more, and the government actually subsidized them because they just didn't have enough for the need. But these suits were so in need that we couldn't give them to the family members, but that only physicians could have them. And that's why they weren't allowed in, because then they would get COVID and then they would get sick and be our next patient.
Right. How about you? Did you get it? Did you catch it?
I never really got sick. No, I don't know. I never tested positive. I never really got the illness. But I'll tell you, there were moments that I got exposed repeatedly, maybe by a patient who we thought didn't have COVID and then ended up testing positive that I didn't have the mask on for. Yeah. But I thank God went through the whole thing unscathed.
Yeah, Rob got COVID right in the beginning and was sick for like 3 weeks. And it was before they even said there's a pandemic.
Yeah, there was no testing.
Wow.
Yeah, that was interesting experience. I would be
Interesting.
I would be sick at night, and I would feel a little better during the day. My fever would come down some, but then it kept getting worse, and I thought if I get to 103, I'm going to have to go to the hospital, but I never did. I did. And that was the turning point. So.
Oh, good. Wow.
Got out of that, yeah. But that was a time where nobody knew anybody who had it, but they were hearing about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was a wild time for our whole society. I hope we never go through that again.
Yeah, let's hope not. Yeah. So, what's the most difficult thing about being a critical care physician now for you?
I would say the thing that I still have a hard time doing is telling someone that they are dying.
Yeah.
That's still the hardest. It's so hard. I would say, actually, no, that takes second place. The first place is calling a family member to tell them that their loved one has died.
Yeah.
I do not look forward to those moments. I know it's important, but oh gosh, the heaviness on those phone calls or those conversations in person. I've seen so many different people process getting that news in different ways, and it's never easy. It's not easy for me. It's not easy for them to hear. But it's so funny. I've done it so many times that I recognize the same look. It's sort of a look of disbelief. Like, how is this happening? How is this happening to me right now? Like shock and almost like you've gotten betrayed by reality. Like it's like the ground gets taken out from underneath you. And I hate to be the one that does it, but at the same time, that's my role, that's my job, and I know to do it compassionately and lovingly and softly as much as possible. And I never just drop the news and leave. I tell them, and I stay with them, and I help them, and I do my best to soften the blow.
Yeah.
What do you do for fun? I mean, to alleviate yourself of all this.
Yeah. Actually, it does sound morbid and heavy, and it certainly can seem that way. But I'll tell you, I come back home, and there's sort of an engagement with life that I don't think other people have with their 9-to-day jobs. Like when my wife comes in from work and she sings, like, or just earlier today, she was singing one of her favorite songs. We just start dancing in our living room together, and it's like we don't need a reason to enjoy life. So I guess that we dance for fun. We hike, and her and I are hoping to. We've been competing in this international competition called High Rocks. It's sort of like a fitness competition, sort of like Ironman, kind of, if you're familiar with that. So her and I want to do more of those. We do that for fun.
Nice. Yeah.
Well, good.
Yeah. So this is the Mystical Underground podcast. So I've got to ask you this question. Have you had any post-death contact with patients or deceased loved ones?
That was my question.
Yeah, well...
You stole it, Rob.
I wrote it down right before this started.
Yeah, or through dreams. I've had contact like that through dreams where somebody that I've known has died, or in some cases I didn't even know they died, and just, appeared to me. And I was sleeping, but it was like I was wide awake at the same time, and they were right there,
Yeah. Yeah. I'll pretend Trish asked the question.
Okay.
But yes, I personally, for the months after my dad died, I had so many dreams with him. And they were, like you said, Rob, they were very vivid dreams. Like I actually felt I was in a living with him. There was one dream that we had where him and I were having lunch and sipping tea together, and he was telling me about his new job, his new adventures. It's almost like he was just giving me updates from the other side, And the cool thing was, I remember feeling, oh gosh, it's so good to see you again. Like this genuine feeling of he's back, he's here. I could touch him, I can see his face, so vivid and real, that it carried into the next day. And I thought, oh, he's only a dream away. And I know that I'm in touch with him. That my intuition is it wasn't just a subconscious hallucination, that I genuinely was communicating with him from the other side.
Well, after my parents died, there was a period of probably 5 or 6 months where I followed them in dreams. They would, I'd see my mother. I still remember them, and it was very visceral and real and weird because now I don't dream about them at all. I think, okay, come on, time.
Yeah.
I visit.
I think one of the most unusual one for me was a kid from our neighborhood where I grew up. I had lost contact with him. We were, it was like 10 years beyond, being a kid. But I remember this kid because he always had a very dry sense of humor. And one night I just had a dream of him out of nowhere. And he just said, he appeared to me and he said, well, I'm still dead. And I said, well, I was like, what? And it was a week or two after I heard from somebody, did you know John died?
Wow.
That's interesting.
Yeah, but what is interesting, that personality carried on after death because because that's something that he would say, something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I do feel like that veil is a lot thinner than we think it is.
Yeah.
Between living and death, and really we call it the living and the dead, but I think there's very much a lot of living on that side too.
Maybe so. Yeah. Yeah, maybe we're more alive and dead.
Yeah.
Well, what are we doing over there? That's what one time I asked the psychic, I said, okay, so I was asking her about my sister. I said, well, so what goes on after you die? And she said, she's having fun. I said, really? Well, what's she doing? And I in the details. She says, I don't know. My impression of her, she's having fun.
Wow.
She was an RN. And she said, your sister needed respite. She needed time away and time out. I thought, I get that.
Yeah.
So one of the things you have throughout your book are these exercises, which I thought are very interesting. It's just, it's about what the subject of the chapter, but you give the reader something to just really get involved in. Could you talk a little bit about that and how you come up with these concepts for the exercises?
Yeah, and I can share one here. One of the first ones that I offered was just something that I do myself, which is sort of a deathbed visualization. And I know it sounds morbid, but believe me that when you do this kind of work, it leads to more joy and more peace in life. But what I notice is a lot of people, when they're facing death and they're facing the possibility of death, they get really real. The authenticity meter goes off the charts. People drop the pretense, they drop the niceties, they tell it like it is most of the time. And I just thought, why is it that we wait till we're about to die to be real with each other? So then I thought, okay, well, let me just see where I'm not being real myself. So what I do is, when I'm in bed at night and I'm about to turn in, I take a moment, I close my eyes, and I visualize, and I pretend I'm several years into the distant future and I am on my deathbed, that I am actually taking my last few breaths. I'm about to die, and I know that when I go to sleep, I'm not going to wake up. I pretend that. I pretend. And then when I really take that on, like, okay, this is the last time I'm going to be alive, what I notice is if I allow it to happen, a lot of the regrets from the past arise. And then, if you're listening, you can do the same thing right now if you have time, but you just imagine that. And then what starts to come up is all the things you wish you had said, all the things you wish you had done, and also the things that you did and said that you wish you hadn't. The people you didn't forgive, the times where you didn't forgive yourself, all of it just comes to surface. And for someone who's deep in the spiritual path, you couldn't ask for better material for healing. So what I do is I notice what arises, and usually there's one of them that comes to the very top, and it's one person or one thing that you said or did that takes the number one spot. So then I say, okay, let me just focus on that. I take that one thing, that person, and let's say it's because something that I did. A lot of times it's regret over the mistakes that I've made in the past. So I look at it, and my first step is, let me look to see where I am resisting. Where am I pushing this away? Where am I denying this? Where am I suppressing or repressing? And then I notice that pushing, and then I drop it. I just let go of all resistance. And I say, this discomfort that I'm feeling, the pain that I'm feeling around thinking about this, let me just hold it. Let me hug it. Let me embrace it. I'm not going to push anymore. I'm just going to welcome it in. I'm going to say, yes, this hurts. I know it hurts. I'm going to stop fighting it. I'm going to love this and embrace it. And when I do that, I notice the tight ball of fear and anger and resentment just softens. And the more I love it and the more I allow, it gets softer and softer, lighter and lighter, till eventually it's just a wisp of nothing. And all that's left is my own self-love and the knowledge that everything I did because it's the best that I could do with what I knew at the time. And there's a place of love and acceptance in that. Then when I'm there, I can tell myself, okay, now it's time to go to sleep. And I can go to sleep with a lightness in my heart.
Yeah.
Is that when you have dreams about
yeah, I usually get vivid dreams after that. Yeah.
Yeah, most people, don't like the idea of thinking about death, but one area where this comes about quite frequently is people who take yoga classes, and I was a yoga teacher for like 28 years, and we all begin our classes in the corpse pose, savasana, it's called. And so it's like you're pretending you're dead,
Yeah.
One time I went to, it wasn't a class I taught, but it was a class I went to, and I made a mistake. It came at the wrong time. And it was a class where everybody was from hospice. I mean, they were all going to die. And so the teacher, when we get to the corpse pose, I noticed he didn't say corpse pose. He just said savasana. And I asked him later about that, and he said, I just could not bring myself to say corpse pose to these people who are on their way out.
Wow. Yeah, that was a smart move on his part.
Yeah,
out, really.
So you're, how far along are you on your new book?
Oh,
we can't wait to read it. Can you tell?
Gosh, I'm just at gathering the stories. I have so many stories of patients and what they've gone through that I'm trying to pick and choose which ones are the most impactful, which one can really represent what I want to say. So I'm very much in the blueprinting of it and the drafting of it. I would say I need another year and a half or two to get anywhere near publication. But I will promise to reach out to you both and
definitely
and present it when the time comes.
Yeah,
great.
So you also have a podcast yourself, don't you?
I do. Yeah, I would say my podcast and my Substack are the two places where I'm the most active.
Okay.
My podcast is Letters to the Sky, but that has very little to do with my medical world. It's my buddy Stephen and I. We're both very interested in comparative religion and comparative spirituality, and we love to point out the wisdom in multiple traditions, and we talk about our own personal experiences with healing and with spirituality. So we do that on our podcast. If you're more interested in the healing side of things and my experiences in the hospital, you should check out my podcast. It's called Adventures in Kindness. And it's adamrizvi.substack.com. I post there on a maybe weekly basis, roughly.
Okay.
And I share stories of what I learned in the hospital, pretty much.
Yeah,
that's great.
Yeah.
You could take some of the material for your next book out of there.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah.
More and more people are using Substack, it seems.
Yeah, I like it because I don't have to film myself. There's no video component. It's great for writers who enjoy writing,
Right.
which I do. And so I write, I post it, and that's it.
Your voice is attracting my cat. He keeps coming over and touching my leg like, hello.
Say hello to your cat.
Thank you for coming
Yeah,
on.
this has been
It's
great, Adam.
Great having you.
Oh, thank you both for having, and thank you, Jon, as well for hosting
I'll
this.
send you the link whenever it goes up. Probably a couple weeks.